Hello, and welcome to another episode of Solipsist Watched, where this week I watched Weird, the Al Yankovic story from 2022. Now, this is a movie I had kind of forgotten about after its initial promotional run that happened, because I think even if you weren't interested in it or aware of it, you probably saw at some point some of the promo pictures of Daniel Radcliffe dressed up as Weird Al. And even if you don't like Weird Al, or even if you don't like Daniel Radcliffe for some reason, I think that was enough of like sort of a weird pop culture crossover that a lot of people saw it. And I had sort of forgotten as well, or not realized the connection, that I had forgotten that way back in the day, somewhere in the late 2000s, I think, there was a Funny or Die sketch that was only like a couple of minutes long, as the Funny or Die sketches usually are. Funny or Die has an underrated catalog of sketches, to be honest. They're not all bangers, but pretty good. And they did a sketch bit that was basically just this movie, but in 3 minutes. And I had to go back and rewatch it because I remember watching it at the time, because it was one of sort of the channels that I had on rotation for, or like YouTube subscription type things. And I remember seeing that sketch, and that's with Aaron Paul and like a bunch of other actors and stuff like that who are famous, or were even more notable at the time, maybe. And so it's interesting to remember that as well as we come to this version of the movie, where largely or somewhat different, mostly different cast of characters, but hilariously close to the set of original beats in that one sketch. That's especially interesting given that, so this movie was made in 2022. That sketch came out like, I want to say like 2009 or 2010. And the whole premise of both is that it's sort of a send up of biopics, like musical biopics. And obviously they've made a bunch of those over time. It's not like, but they come and go. And so it's especially interesting right around this time. I actually didn't check, but they like right around the time this movie came out, within at least a couple of years, they also had the Freddie Mercury and Queen biopic. They had the Elton John biopic. There were a handful of others. I'm trying to remember around like late 2000s which ones would have been coming out. I think it might have been like the Doors biopic, and whatever else. But I think that's just a hilarious repetition of things, obviously, as a lot of media tends to go in cycles. But I don't know when they actually put this movie into production, and whether it was particularly spurred on by the surge of new musical biopics that had been coming out in the years around that time. So yeah, this whole premise of this movie is that it's supposed to be, on the surface, if you only take a passing glance, it looks like it's a biopic about Weird Al. In reality, it's a comedy movie extremely loosely based on a couple of elements of his life, and then the entire plot line is just madness and humor around, like, here's a version of Weird Al and events in Weird Al's life that definitely, absolutely never happened and are completely over the top. And so then it turns into sort of this, the comparison for me, the obvious comparison is going to be for something like SNL. We've talked before on this show about SNL movies, skits that came out of SNL, especially in the 80s and 90s, that turned into full-fledged movies, and the variety of quality some of those movies had, where some were pretty darn good and some were not good at all. In fact, we've watched one of each, I think, on this show, if not more, with MacGruber, which I thought was quite bad, and Pop Star, which, if memory serves, I thought was pretty solid. And so this lands in sort of that same area of being a sketch idea that was then, not through SNL obviously, turned into a full movie. And to its credit, I think, well, ultimately there's only so much you can take from like a sketch premise, right? It's very unlikely that you're going to take a sketch premise, and especially in the realm of comedy, which we've talked about before, is hard to make deep and complicated without either losing the comedy or just seeming nonsensical. They do a good balance of not making it the bad version of that, where it's just a bunch of little sketches that are stitched together, but also not losing the original premise. In fact, like I said, like going back to the original sketch, I was amazed to see just how closely it basically follows the plot of the sketch. And so, honestly, really clever. I don't think there are really any other of these sort of sketch type movies that follow that idea of we'll just take the sketch as is and flesh it out. And so having, like, the premise is funny on its face. The idea of Weird Al is such just he's weirdly a very normal guy, you know? He's very sort of not in the industry, and in that sort of way, and he's lived a fairly normal life outside of, you know, his musical touring, and by virtue of being on sort of the fringe of the music industry and fringe of comedy, he's sort of avoided a lot of the ups and downs that are typical of an industry life, let's say. The exact kind of things that would make for a big air quotes compelling biopic, the trials and tribulations of the tortured artist, when in reality Weird Al is just sort of just a guy who plays the accordion pretty good and it's pretty funny and makes some decent comedy music that has performed incredibly well commercially. But he's stayed pretty much the same guy the whole time, as far as anybody can tell, and everybody seems to think he's incredibly sweet and normal. And so the idea of taking a person like that and being like, okay, obviously can't make a normal biopic about him because it would be incredibly dull because there's no drama to it. But what if we went above and beyond and punched up a bunch of incredibly stupid events and drama that is the exact kind of thing that real, I don't want to say real, but real, big air quotes, rock stars and pop stars would get themselves into, the kind of trouble that life tends to lead to. What if we made a false version of all of that and then went even further with it? And so ultimately, a lot of this movie is contingent upon, do you like Weird Al's humor? And that means more than just, do you like his songs? Because Weird Al has, he's had a really long career now. He's been active since the early 80s or maybe even the late 70s, and has had hits in every decade. But he's also had a relatively small but not insubstantial movie and TV career as well. So he's been in a bunch of other media and has written and directed movies and been in movies and things like that. And so if you're not really on board with the sort of goofy, wacky, but I would call his humor fairly grounded, it's not like complete absurdism. if you're into that and you can, get past the very sort of surface level, goofy sort of adolescent elements of it, which I don't think are the majority of it, then I think this has a lot of good humor and good writing to go with it. It's not complicated by any means. This is not a complicated narrative. There are no like varying threads to go through. You're never really emotionally invested in the situation because it takes itself so unseriously. And the worst, honestly, like the worst thing I can say about it is that there are some scenes that feel like they're just there to cue up him writing a song, writing one of his old songs, and then giving them an excuse to perform it in the movie, which is fine. And if you were bothered by that, you probably wouldn't be watching the Weird Al movie to begin with. So that's sort of like the worst I can say about it. Interestingly, so all the performances, as far as I can tell, of the music in the movie are not done by Daniel Radcliffe. Radcliffe does the physical acting for the musical scenes, but the performance is done by Weird Al. In fact, well, actually, there are a couple of insert shots that I find very funny because it's one of those things that's like, it's sort of a joke for filmmakers, of like, hey, here's an explicit continuity error, where they do an insert shot of him playing the accordion, and it's very clearly not Daniel Radcliffe's hand in the insert shot, because it's like totally different like size and shape, and his arms all hairy and stuff like that. It's like that's clearly Weird Al doing the performance in the insert shot. But that shot's only there as a joke of the sort of continuity error that exists in performance movies, musical performances in movies. But as far as I could tell, the musical performances for the movie are original recordings. Like they are not the album recordings, which I think is smart. I think it would have bothered me more if they had just stitched in the album recordings of Weird Al's songs and had Radcliffe act over them. And that's not to say that they don't even do it necessarily for a consistency thing. There are certain performances where it's like, well, not all of the instruments are even there, but they're still in the soundtrack, in the track, so to speak. Does that make sense? Like there's this instrument is playing in the audio on screen, but that instrument is not on the screen. And clearly they very much don't care about that. But so they're not, what I'm saying is they didn't re-record it to make it consistent with the scene. They re-recorded it to re-record it, which I think is smart. And so some of the recordings are a little more raw. Some of them are a little bit like less fleshed out. And so if you were like really a diehard Weird Al fan and only wanted to hear the best version of his music, then I guess it might bother you. But I think from a filmmaking perspective, it's a smart thing to do. I think it's also probably smart not to have Radcliffe perform it, not because he can't. Well, I mean, I don't think Daniel Radcliffe can play the accordion. I don't know how to play the accordion, and so I wasn't actually watching his hands that closely. So I don't know how his miming of accordion playing was. I imagine it was probably pretty limited. But the Daniel Radcliffe is very talented in a variety of ways, including somewhat musically talented as well. And so I could have seen them trying to have him sing the songs at the very least. I don't know how that would have gone though. And this is also a fairly low budget movie. I think it's only like $8 million is the number I saw. So all things considered, like they're already doing a lot with the limited money they had for this. I guess we could pivot to talking about on that subject, talking about the cast. The cast is very star-studded, and obviously this was like, obviously Weird Al's been around a long time and knows a lot of people, and I have to imagine that a lot of the actors and the actors present in this movie are like personal friends or people who are just like in it for the fun of it rather than to make a buck, because this, I mean, there's probably several dozen recognizable actors in the cast list, lots and lots of cameos, and all kinds of great stuff. There's also just a lot of they do the thing sometimes where they're like, hi, I am historical character being played, or historical person being played by a different actor. And they lean into that both as the gag of they're acknowledging the biopic problem of having another actor play a famous person who doesn't look the same. But then there's also just fun cameos where it's like, this person is never introduced. And if you're not familiar with like the thing that they're from, you wouldn't. It's more like a sight gag than anything else. Like there's a scene of the pool and there's like tons of characters at this pool party. One of the ones that really stuck out to me that's such a weird inclusion, but I love it, is Divine is just at the pool party. It's a weird cast, a weird like set of cameos, all sorts of things. Lots of fun, especially if you are sort of in tune with the various forms of art that are being referenced from around the sort of 80s and early 90s period that they're drawing all these references from. Weird Al himself has cameos in here as the record producer, who he also plays in the original sketch, and then of course we have Daniel Radcliffe, who is fantastic. I mean, he doesn't look exactly like Weird Al. Weird Al is a very unique looking dude, but hey, I wasn't constantly thinking that's Daniel Radcliffe in a wig. So, I mean, good job there, among other things. He's obviously Daniel Radcliffe with a mustache and a wig, and that's a pretty funny gag on its own. But he's also just a genuinely talented actor in so many ways. I think there's something else or multiple other things we've watched on this show, on this series, that he's been in. But like, I'm always impressed with Daniel Radcliffe. He seems like a lovely person who seems to mostly have taken his money and just decided to do fun projects for himself. Whether they're good or not is a separate question. What was the one we watched where he's got the guns on his hands? Anyway, he's just having fun with it. And you know what? That's great for him. And I love that. He's also absolutely shredded in this movie. He's always been very fit from what I've seen. Like, he's always kept his body is just very fit, and even when he doesn't seem to be promoting anything or doing a performance that requires that to be the case. And I don't know if that was an explicit choice for this movie in particular or not, because I mean, that's like kind of a gag unto itself, because Weird Al, they don't really make a gag out of it. Like, they don't make him do, any big feats of strength as plot points or anything like that, or even as sight gags. So if it's a sight gag, it's just he has his shirt off a couple of times and is absolutely ripped. And meanwhile, the real Weird Al is, this incredibly tall, gangly looking dude, who I don't think anybody has ever thought is particularly fit. But this might be the most shredded I've ever seen Daniel Radcliffe. Maybe not like the biggest, but he's like very, very buff and very lean. And it just really adds to the humor of the situation where it's like, yeah, sure, why not? Why wouldn't he be all that as Weird Al? Sure. So his physical acting is great. His his act, all of the aspects of his acting are really strong, and he's just a fun pick for this role, just because like so many other things he seems to do, he's doing it for fun, and he's leaning into it and committing to it completely, no matter how absurd the situation is. Taking it very clearly with tongue in cheek, but with absolute sincerity at the same time. Really, really enjoyed his performance. There are so many great supporting performances. Just really sort of everybody across the board does a really solid job. There are one or two cameos, like famous people cameos, that I think are a little bit more disruptive than actually good performances, if that makes sense. Like sometimes you have a cameo because that person can genuinely do that role in a good job, and sometimes it's literally just there so you point and go, ooh, look who it is. And yeah, actually, I'm just going to say Lin-Manuel Miranda is one of those in this movie, and I'm pointing him out specifically because he's got so many cameos in so many things, and it's almost always awkward because, to be perfectly honest, he's not a great actor. So anyway, Lin-Manuel Miranda is always a little disruptive to me. But I digress. Yeah, like I said, this movie's not particularly complicated. It's not doing any sort of complex plotting. It's really there just to, tell a wacky story and let you be along for the ride and give you some solid laughs. It's not doing any like really deep or multi-layered humor either. It's mostly like the secondary layer of most of the jokes is that it is either a joke about the real person that they are parodying as well, whether Weird Al himself or one of the other real world people that are being acted by somebody else, or just the sort of sending up the genre of the musical biopic. Those are the secondary levels, and it doesn't overstay its welcome. It's long enough. There are certain scenes I think could be shortened a little bit, but it's not overly long. It's not trying to do too much. It understands exactly what it is and what it's capable of, and sort of moves at a pretty good pace to not overstay its welcome or wear out the humor, which it definitely could start to do if it lingered a little bit longer. So like overall, I think this movie, for all that it is and all that it very clearly isn't, is very solid. It's, it's a good 90-ish minutes of good laughs and good chuckles, and not asking you to think too hard, and just letting you observe and do some wacky like comedic, like borderline absurdist humor type stuff. It's very much what it says on the tin, and I had fun with it. I think it's pretty solid. Like I said, if you are not averse to the Weird Al style of humor, or in general, sort of the 90s, late 80s, early 90s comedies, which is where a lot of Weird Al's humor sort of either comes from or is very similar to, then I think you'll probably have a good time with this. It's just fun. Anyway, thank you all for watching another episode of Solipsist Watched, and I'll see you for something different next time.